So, should we bring in the closer? And
I think it'd be a good time for that.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Free Baseball Podcast presented by the Athlete Sub. It's the Big 5-0. It is our 50th episode. I had a plan to go to the dollar store and get like the streamers and a party hat and the noisemaker, the one that you blow out, but I didn't. So you're just gonna have to suffer with our little celebration. It's the 50th episode of our wonderful little baseball podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Jake Crumpler, and the Yankee fan base mayor, according to his title now.
Everything else.
So part-time co-host Isaiah Hansen. We talked some baseball. Spring training is back. We talked about it starting last podcast. And there's some storylines to talk about. The big one is the pitch clock, and I'm pretty interested to hear what you guys have to think about it. And since he's our guest, Jake, I am going to start with Isaiah. So what are your thoughts on the pitch clock, Isaiah?
It's appreciated, honored for the first take of the 50th episode. But I was watching a lot of high A games last year. I watched my Renegades, the Yankees, high A team. And the pitch clock has been there for, I believe, 2 years at the most, if not at least a full year. And a lot of times you really didn't notice the pitch clock so much because everybody was just kind of used to it. There was no violations. There was more than enough time for the pitcher to gather themselves. So I think there's going to be a bit of there is an adjustment period that's going to be needed, and we're seeing it already. And not everybody's going to be happy for it. I'm sure, as a Yankee fan, Garrett Cole is going to use it in the future after getting blown up, possibly by the Astros. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I don't want to see it. I'm just a realist sometimes. I don't think it's going to be a problem so much. A year from now, we're going to be looking at it, and we're not even going to talk about the pitch clock. It's just going to be a normality. But it's going to take a while for us to get there, I think.
Definitely. It's gonna take some adjusting too. I think it's also going to take some adjusting to get used to people complaining about it. I think that's been the biggest thing we've seen on social media. I mean, that's usually where I hear baseball talk. I'm not really going around my work office talking about the pitch clock, but nonetheless on Twitter, Facebook, all over the place, people are complaining about it or backing it up. And we were talking about it before we went live, but I'm already getting sick and tired of it. And that happened really fast. I think a lot of people don't understand the point of it. Obviously everyone knows it's supposed to speed up the game, but I think a lot of people want to blame the pitch clock for whatever happens in terms of players getting injured or players having to change their game and that kind of stuff. And it's not like the players are being surprised by this. They just have to be in the box when the time is ready. It's like a couple seconds difference than they normally would. We're not getting less baseball, which is another big thing that I see people saying all the time. We're getting less non-baseball. The downtime is what's taken away. The batter just walking around after taking a pitch or the pitcher just thinking, I don't know. There's so much downtime in baseball, and this will cut away from that, hopefully making the game more exciting. I think there's a lot of empty space that can be done away with, and I don't think it will change the game at all. And I don't think you can blame the pitch clock for any pitchers getting injured. If you think that throwing 97 and not having enough time to rest in between pitches is going to get you injured, then just throw slower. I think that's the biggest advice there. But it's not only is it going to take time for the players to get used to, but it's also going to take time for fans to get used to. We've seen already from what's happened in the minor leagues that at the very beginning of it, there were lots of violations and it took 3 to 4 weeks. And that's exactly what spring training is for. Hopefully the WBC not using the pitch clock doesn't interfere with those players that are leaving spring training to do that. But I think everybody should be able to adjust to it just fine. It's definitely going to be better for the game. But yeah, I'm already pretty sick of hearing everybody complain about it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, Jake, and it's pretty aggravating because everyone's like, "Oh, I'm getting less baseball for my money." You're just losing out on like 20 odd minutes of players dick, for lack of a better term, because that's what they're doing. watching a pitcher just kind of sit out there and think, or shake off a million signs, or, watching a batter step out of the box, step back into the box, adjust both batting gloves, their elbow guard, grab their crotch 1,000 times. It's annoying. There's an update on the pitch clock so far as of about 8 hours ago. The average time so far this spring is about about 2 hours and 39 minutes. Last spring, it was just over an hour at 3 or over. If I could speak correctly on the 50th episode, that'd be wonderful. 3 hours. So that's 22 minutes shorter. They 65 games, 113 violations, which averages out to about 1.74 per game, which is 0.1 point off of being exactly identical to the first week of the minor leagues last year, which is when they implemented the pitch clock. So it's nearly identical. 85 of the violations have been on pitchers. 28 have been on hitters, and this is coming from Jason Stark at Jason JAYSONST at Twitter or on Twitter. So you're seeing the adjustment period. Isaiah said after a while in the minors, you kind of just don't notice it anymore. Is it really? Jake's telling me my Wi-Fi is struggling. But I think, as Isaiah said, you're just not going to see as many issues with the pitch clock. It's just going to be fine.
Yeah, it's crazy how big of a difference it's already had. I didn't think it would make this have this much of an impact on the time of games. I thought it would be like a 15-minute thing, but the fact that it's like almost 30 minutes is pretty crazy. So and I'm excited to see the ramifications, but it should be a different brand of baseball, not a different game.
Yeah. And what is the number one complaint usually from non-baseball fans who try to give it a shot? Like, oh, it's too boring. It's too long. And I think we could all agree on this. Maybe we're a little bit biased, but if you show anybody a great baseball game, they're going to enjoy it. And I think with this pace, it gives the opportunity for more great games. And it's just action moving forward. So I think this could really be a low key, something that brings more eyes product. Your friends watching it with you one time. It's not this long anymore, and it's pretty exciting. So, could potentially grow the game also.
Yeah, I think one of the only issues that I've seen with it is honestly, I think, at least from the spring games that I watched, it looks like they're starting the pitch clock like almost immediately after pitch is received, which I think is kind of a mistake, and it needs to be when the pitcher receives the ball. And I honestly think a lot of the issues would just like, I know, I can't remember who it was, but it was a Red Sox whatever that was talking about, like, he played in triple last year. He's like, the pitch clock felt a lot slower than it compared to spring training. He said it still feels a little bit accelerated. It's sort of a weird spot to be in. And I think it'll probably even out more as the season goes on, because I think they're just going to be really strict on it right now, just because of how the pitch clock needs to be implemented. Like, it needs to be kind of a hard line. Like, if you can't stick to the pitch clock, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, I think that was Ryan Fitzgerald or something for the Red Sox. But right. Yeah, it does seem like the operators of the pitch clock itself, you need to get used to it as well. So hopefully some seasoning on their part in the spring training helps a little bit. But yeah, I ultimately think this is going to be a positive for the game. It's not ideal. I never really cared about the pace. There's obviously that big that video going around of Pedro Baez in the NLCS in like 2017 or whatever, where he took so long that Jose Altuve can hit like 7 inside the park home runs during the time it takes him to throw one pitch. So yeah, it'll definitely cut down on stuff like that. And I still think there's other things that like the commercials and that kind of stuff on ESPN games that could take away time as well. But, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be getting new fans into baseball as well, because they say like, oh, it's boring, it's too slow. It's still faster than football. Football is the most watched sport in the entire country, and by a pretty wide margin. So I don't think this is going to change anything on that front. Like a 30-minute difference is not going to do anything. I still think it comes down to marketing players and making the game more exciting. And maybe the pitch clock, having more balls in play, will do that. but it is yet to be seen.
Yeah. And on that note, I think the other spring training storyline that we really wanted to talk about were the injuries to a couple major players, and those being Joe Musgrove of the San Diego Padres, Seiya Suzuki of my Chicago Cubs, and Gavin Lux of the Los Angeles Dodgers, which are all three sort of big losses for the game of baseball. Lux's is going to be probably the worst of the bunch, and we don't really know the timetable for Musgrove and Seiya.
Yeah, it's Lux is out for the year with a torn ACL. Disappointing. I mean, gotta say caveat first. I'm never root for an injury, but I always root against the Dodgers. So we'll put that out of the way. It is disappointing that Lux is injured, especially for an entire season. I hate when you lose a guy for a whole season because you always get your hopes up on what you might see from a guy in the next year. And I think Lux having the potential that he's shown in the minor leagues and not quite reaching that, this was a year where he could finally be reaching that breakout. Obviously, we won't be seeing that now. But now the Dodgers have a lot of questions because he was lined up to be the starting shortstop, maybe figure elsewhere around the infield and the outfield. And now he's gone, and he was sort of going to be a key part of that offense. And now they've got Miguel Rojas as the starting shortstop. That's awful. This is like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa levels of offensive potential there. He's a great defender, but yeah, not ideal for a team that has hopes of winning the World Series. And their offense was already looking light. Would not be surprised if they go out and make a big trade like they've done in seasons past when it seemed like they were sort of done. They went and got Mookie a couple of years ago. They got Freddie Freeman, obviously, in free agency, but they've made big trades for Trey Turner and Max Scherzer and that kind of stuff. So we'll see what happens on that front. I think this does sort of open the door for Jason Hayward to get more of a look because you could see Chris Taylor playing more infield. And I already told Davis to start mentally preparing for Jason Hayward to be really good this year.
Hey, it's the Rangers.
It sucks because like you said, you wanted to see if Gavin Lux could potentially take that next step. Not that you want to see the Dodgers do well, but for any young player that's developing, to throw them off course a little bit. I hope that he can get back on course next season when he does return. But yeah, I mean, and Miguel Rojas, as high of a ceiling as it has, proves to be at least pretty interesting now because you definitely needed that infield piece now. Not that it's going to have much championship complications or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Davis also mentioned Seiya and Joe Musgrove. I'll wait for Davis to come back to talk about Seiya. But Musgrove, he dropped a weight on his toe, his big toe on his left foot. That's pretty disappointing from a guy that had a great season last year and is one of the key pieces of the Padres rotation. Do you think he could come back full strength? I know that like toes can really mess up with a pitcher's wind up and that kind of stuff. I think he's going to be out a month or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, you it sucks to lose like a month of preparing to come back, so maybe he doesn't start off as strong as he could have if he had a full spring. Mm-hmm. But I do think he'll be fine overall. It's a toe. I mean, he might need a little bit a start or two to readjust to the regular.
Oh, for sure.
But I'm sure he'll be fine.
Yeah, they've definitely got a deep enough rotation. We know that they've been acquiring starters at will over the past few years with Yu Darvish and Blake Snell joining the rotation, but they added Seth Lugo in an attempt to make him a starter. They're trying to move Nick Martinez back to the rotation. They signed Michael Wacha this offseason. They've got Adrian Morejon as well coming out of the minor league / coming off of Tommy John surgery. He pitched a little at the end of last year. I think he could have a big impact on the team. And then they've also got like Brent Honeywell and Ryan Weathers. They've got a lot of depth there that I think they'll be able to weather the storm of Musgrove being injured for a month, but they should be fine. Davis looking much better. How are you feeling about Seiya?
Seiya is supposedly just to be an oblique strain, and I know you couldn't hear me on the previous one. You're talking about Jason Hayward. Jason Hayward homered against the Rangers today, and I think he broke the double against the Cubs when they played. So be prepared for Jason Hayward to put up like a 7 more season. Seiya is kind of disappointing because I've been literally sending Jake every single picture that they post of Seiya because he added like 20 pounds of like muscle mass, and he's just yoked. He's gigantic. And I've been like really excited seeing the batting practice videos because I'm just wanting him to hit, 30 tanks onto like weight. And it just sucks that he's going to be injured. He had to pull out the World Classic, which if you've read our way too early predictions, is Japan to be a dark horse to win the World Baseball Classic, and he's a starter on that team. So now they're going to have to cope without him. It sucks seeing one of the lone bright spots from last year when he was not really get a full shot at spring training or the World Baseball Classic for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is supposed to be big breakout year for Seiya. Maybe it's next year now that he's going to be sort of working back from an oblique injury for the first 6 weeks or 6 weeks from now, first couple weeks of the season. I hope he comes back strong. He's got loads of potential, and I think he showed that in the second half of last year where he was batting like over 300 and was crushing balls. And yeah, like you said, he's looking yoked, and that's what we like to see in spring training. I don't know if you guys seen the pictures of Jeremy Pena, Tyler O'Neill. Jeremy Pena is looking so strong. It's insane. He looks like a bodybuilder.
Jeremy the Rock Pena.
I know, right? It's crazy. His triceps are monstrous. Yeah, that guy's gonna hit 50 home runs this year.
Oh God.
His biceps were as big as my head from the picture. That guy's absolutely yoked. God, Astros are so whack, man. I'm really tired of having a good team all the time. Speaking of a good team all the time, the San Diego Padres extended a big guy this time because they just have unlimited money. They just print monopoly money and hand it out to all their players because they've signed Manny Machado, who in the week heard that he was going to opt out of his contract after this year. And they're like, oh, that ain't happening. Here you go, Manny. 11-year, $350 extension for Mr. Machado with a full no-trade clause, locking down who I believe is the captain of their team. Manny, me and Jake about his politics or whatever, and his dumb decisions or whatever, but Manny Machado is a world-class baseball player. He's one of the best players in general in baseball, let alone at his position, which is a premier position. So, yeah, Manny going anywhere, going to retire a Padre most likely, and hopefully win some World Series championships along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a win-win for both sides because Manny Machado, as we were talking about, he's taking he's taking less money for the first couple of years of the deal, I assume, to give the team flexibility, something like Tom Brady did. Of course, he's going to get money on the back end. But it was a quick way for him to make money. Remember the 10-year, $300 million deal that he signed a couple of years ago? And we thought it was insane. It was like groundbreaking. So why not go ahead and get some more money on that side? And I know we were talking about how the Padres are making small market teams look pretty dumb right now. I just think about what we saw the other day with Brian Reynolds, apparently, coming back for 8 years, $134 million, and the Pirates saying no. So a smart franchise is locking in potentially at least definitely top 2 third baseman in baseball, if not the best.
Yeah, it's crazy that they're getting a discount over the first few years or so because this is still the 4th largest contract in MLB history, trailing only Mike Trout's extension with the Angels, Mookie Betts' extension with the Dodgers, and Aaron Judge's free agent deal with the Yankees this past offseason. But Manny Machado definitely deserving of this kind of money. I think he's the only person ever to sign 2 $300 million contracts. If you remember, he was in the offseason where Bryce Harper signed a $300 million deal. He also signed a $300 million deal. That's the 12th largest contract of all time at 10 years and 300. He took that to another level with this one. It's pretty crazy how much he's getting paid. I guess the only argument can be made for Carlos Correa. I don't think he signed a $300 deal with the Mets, but Machado's definitely made a crazy amount of money in his career, and it's cool that he'll be around in San Diego for a long time. I wonder a lot if this precludes them from getting Shohei Ohtani next offseason, if this precludes them from keeping Juan Soto the following offseason, what kind of ramifications this has on the rest of the team. But they should be fine the way that they've been spending money. We all know they've got unlimited 40-man roster spots. They can just have whoever they want. So as long as they're fine spending a bunch of money, we know that the owners don't really need the money, nor are they going to struggle to get more money owning baseball teams. But yeah, pretty crazy. Machado got his bag. He's going to be a Padre for the rest of his life.
Yeah. I really like, I'm trying to find the exact quote, but I really like to the Padres owner quote on it and on them spending so much money. The end of it was, in the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as the baseball gods one day smile down upon the San Diego Padres and we win a World Series, which is the mentality that every single owner in baseball should have. You're a sports franchise for fans first. You should want to win first, money second. Typically, once you win, then the money comes in the first place. So, I think that was the best possible thing he could have said. And Manny Machado, I really do think he's like, you can argue like Soto's probably their best player at his peak. Maybe it's Tatis, whatever. Manny Machado, I think, is the leader of that team. And I don't really think there's a question about it.
By far, especially with Hosmer gone now too. But yeah, you made a good point there by reading off that quote. The Padres are one of just 6 teams in baseball that have never won a World Series, alongside the Rangers, Brewers, Mariners, Rockies, and Rays. We know the Rockies are never going to win one. The Rays are sort of doing their own thing, and obviously Rangers, Brewers, and Mariners all have a shot at some point. But the Padres being on there, they've been around for a while, so they're definitely on the path to giving themselves a shot to win that first ring.
I think it's also a really underrated aspect of like just how to really buy into, because San Diego, like bridging out of realm for a second, San Diego doesn't really have another major sport. They don't. They used to have the Chargers. They're gone. Qualcomm, empty. It's probably been gone, I'm not sure. But there's no other sport in San Diego that's a major one to really root for. So San Diego, and the Padres are cornering the market. They're the team in San Diego that their entire community will build around and will rally, especially if they're good. Not only are you going to from outside fans, because fans, especially if the pitch clock works and then young fans get into it. The Padres have young, exciting, like Fernando Tatis, like Manny Machado, like Juan Soto. They have a good pitching. They have cool-looking jerseys, and they have a team that will win. But also with your local fans, they're going to fill Petco literally every single game this season. They're going to. And they're going to make so much money at the gates and from concessions just because of that, and especially through a playoff run, because they're going to make the playoffs and they're probably going to contend for a World Series. Having a team like this, especially in a community that so desperately needs it. Look at Oakland now, because Oakland, they lost the Warriors, correct? They don't have the Warriors. They don't have the Warriors anymore.
Technically, yeah.
Sort of, but they lost the Raiders too. So look at teams like that, and they're unwilling to spend because their owner is a chud, and he absolutely refuses to spend any money on his baseball team.
No,
that's probably not what you need to be doing. But rant over, unless you guys want to add on to that, and we can get to the crux of our show.
I was just gonna show. I saw a tweet the other day. Just this banner right here. So the Padres have over $1 billion committed on just 3 players, right? You got 340 for Manny, 350 for Xander. You got Tatis at 280, 108 for Darvish, 100 million for Musgrove, and like you said, we'll see what they do with Juan Soto. But yeah, they're putting their money where their mouth is, and I think, and I said this when they acquired Juan Soto, I think the Padres have real potential to. They're a small market team now, but to grow into a major market. You've seen the Warriors. The Warriors are now the most valuable franchise in the NBA, as the last I checked. So I think the Padres will make a nice jump. They got a nice logo. It's a sweet, weather and everything. So we'll see what they do. I think they're going to do just fine.
Yeah. The exact quote was, "1 year soon, the baseball gods will smile on the San Diego Padres and we'll have a parade." And I think that parade will be coming sooner rather than later.
I remember watching that the Juan Soto debut and listening to those Padres commentators. They were just so geeked up. So like they deserve it. They deserve it. So
no, it's the same feeling that I had as a Warriors fan when they had Kevin Durant. Like it's just you just have so much talent on one team. You're just like, I remember watching this. I mean, this is just from a basketball perspective. I remember watching KD growing up and being like, that guy is so freaking good at basketball. And the Warriors are already like the best team in the NBA. And to have him on my team, it was just bonkers for the couple of years that it's there. But it's like, that's what the Padres are turning into. They've got a super team, basically. I mean, it's like when the Dodgers were adding all the talent the past couple of years. I mean, last year they were absolutely stacked. Except I wasn't rooting for them. Rooting a lot more for the Padres than I was for the Dodgers. But yeah, it's pretty crazy what they're building over there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But enough about the Padres. We're here to talk AL Central. We've been breaking down divisions by week on the pods for an off-season review because baseball started back, but we got to review all the teams. We talked AL Central not very much, really. We usually talk about the Guardians. We ignore the Tigers doing anything because they're terrible. We usually pick on the Royals because they're terrible, and but it's time. It's time for the AL Central. We talked about it a little bit too when Devin was here because we talked about teams that were going to make the playoffs that missed it last year, and a lot of ones said the White Sox, like on Jake's hat. But we are going to review by team, by division, based on their additions, subtractions, any extensions, and what we think about the team and how we think it's going to go for them this year. And I'm wearing my Royals hat, and we're going to start with them because they were the bottom feeders in the AL Central. Kansas City Royals in this offseason have added Ryan Yarbrough, Jordan Lyles, Aroldis Chapman, Zach Greinke, and Franmil Reyes all through free agency. And they also added Josh Taylor in the Red Sox. They lost, however, Ryan O'Hearn, Michael A. Taylor, and Adalberto Mondesi. What are the realistic projections this year from the Royals, do you guys think?
Bad.
I think best case scenario is a lot of these guys they signed are just trade pieces if they perform well. If they perform well, and that's a big if, but I do think like a guy like Franmil Reyes with some playing time could potentially bounce back for them and be a trade piece maybe. Chapman, I guess, could potentially bounce back, but I wouldn't count on it either. I do like Ryan Yarbrough, like on their team. I think he's pretty decent, but overall, there's just not much to talk about. There's a lot of moves, but not really a difference going to be made moving forward.
So Isaiah, we've been grading the off seasons not on just like a straight up school scale, but like when people do tier lists on YouTube, so like S, A, B, C, and then we're not doing a D tier. It's either C or F. Okay. How would you grade the Royals off season?
So it's C or F. You said right?
It's S, A, B, C, or F.
Okay, I'm gonna give them the bottom feeders. Really nothing done here.
F.
Yeah, straight up F. Yes.
Yeah. Disappointing offseason. I forgot to throw in they signed Jackie Bradley Jr. to a minor league deal just today, so I don't think that changes anything for you in terms of grades. But it's hard to tell with a team in this position where they were bad last year. They're starting to filter in their minor league players. They're still 2 or 3 years away. They're not a team that spends a lot. They like to call themselves a small market team. They're not losing a whole lot either, but they don't do anything with their moves. You can say that the guys that they signed this offseason were to possibly bring aboard prospects at the deadline, that they can trade these guys away for prospects. It's not like they signed anybody super exciting that's going to get you some elite level prospect that's going to advance your rebuild or make your team better in the future. None of these guys are going to be around by the next competitive Royals team. So that's one front where I'm disappointed by them. But then it's not like they made any trades of their current guys to get more talent on their team. They've got a lot of young pitchers that are not really going to be around, I don't think, for the next competitive team. Like they've got Brad Keller and a bunch of other guys that haven't quite reach their potential, like what's his name? Daniel Lynch, Chris Bubich, and Jackson Kowar. All of those guys were big prospects coming up in the last few years, and they've not been able to reach their potential. So I think they sort of have to pivot on guys like that, and they're sort of filling their rotation with bad pitchers. I don't want to call Greinke bad. I don't want to call Yarbrough bad. I don't want to call Lyles bad. They're just all slightly below average at this point in their careers, and it's not exciting. They're just not doing anything to advance the team. Obviously, this gives them a way to play their young players, which is great. I want to see a lot of Vinny Pasquantino. I want to see Bobby Witt. I want to see MJ Melendez and the rest of those guys. This team is still a couple years away from competing, but they didn't do anything to advance the rebuild. They didn't do anything to enhance the team in the present or the future. And so I'm also going with an F because, I mean, they didn't lose anybody, but they didn't bring anybody aboard that's exciting, and they didn't really do anything to make the team better in the short or long term.
Unfortunately, I think I may also agree with you on F tier because the Royals, while I think their team outlook, like in terms of last season, is better, they didn't add very much, and I just don't. Their offseason wasn't very inspiring. They really needed help in their lineup. They really needed help in their rotation, and they needed to add guys that they could flip. And a lot of the guys that they added they could flip are mid. Like they're not really guys that you're going to expect to be getting a good amount of. Like Aroldis Chapman is cooked. Like he's about as cooked as it could possibly be. And I'm not really feeling him, man. He's just Josh Taylor. He's like a reclamation project, but I really don't think that you can really do a whole lot with him. Yarbrough is fine. All he is sort of an innings eater, but he doesn't all that many innings. He's like a weird kind of swingman that this team doesn't really need. Greinke's a story, and people will come out to see Zach Greinke and Franmil Reyes absent little stretch with the Cubs last year. But yeah, it's not very inspiring. So just based on how their offseason, I think it's an F. Based on their team outlook in terms of the next year, last season, if you didn't know this, 55% of their home runs last season were hit by rookies as a team. So at least you have a little bit of excitement there. Michael Garcia so far in spring training, I know it's only been a few games, but he looks pretty good, and he's projected to be on the big league roster. So you have more coming. Potentially, you could see some of the guys in their top 10 this year. I think you could have a chance to see. I think Nick Lofton is there, and then maybe you could see Asa Lacy. And I think he got drafted in like 2020, 2019. And Asa Lacy was supposed to be he was one of their top prospects for like a hot minute, and then he's kind of dropped down. But you've got Vinny Pasquantino to look at, and then you got Bobby Witt Jr., Michael Garcia potentially. There's some reason to be excited for the Royals, but still not very good.
Yeah, I think what locks them into that F tier, signing Aroldis Chapman.
Yeah,
I mean they could have had a great off season, but if you sign Aroldis Chapman, automatic F. They had a terrible off season and then sign Aroldis Chapman. It's like, hey man, I don't know what you want me to do. I have to give you an F.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. On the Royals before we can move on to our next in their division.
What was the question? Cut out.
You have anything else that you want to add about the Royals, or can we move on to our next bottom feeder to talk about?
Let's move on. I'm not too excited.
Let's go for it. Up next is the top to bottom. Royals were worst. Tigers weren't too far off. The Detroit Tigers added back Matt Boyd in free agency. They added Michael Lorenzen also to free agency, as well as Cesar Hernandez through free agency. And then through a trade with the Phillies, they added Nick Maton and Matt Vierling. They lost, however, all of these guys to free agency. Andrew Chafin, Daniel Norris, Tucker Barnhart, Victor Reyes, Willie Castro, Harold Castro, Jeimer Candelario, and then they traded away Joe Jimenez and Gregory Soto. No extensions to talk about. Good God, the Tigers are awful.
Yeah, they look pretty bad. And it's kind of, I feel bad because 2 years ago, I thought the Tigers were moving in a pretty good direction, of course, with Torque. And now all of a sudden everything looks bleak. I mean, I guess there's still some kind of potential for the team overall. But Baez being, your leading guy without Torque, being who we think he is, Austin Meadows, and of course Badu, he fell flat. I thought he would do better than what he Badu'd.
Boo. Everyone boo this man.
Yeah, as far as the offseason moves go, I mean, 2 years ago, I guess I would have been kind of excited for Mike Lorenzen and maybe a little bit of Matt Boyd. But aside from that, it's really bad. In fact, I think maybe a little bit worse than the Royals. So I'm going to go ahead and give them an F as well.
Mm-hmm. The big thing I had while writing up the additions and subtractions for this team, obviously sort of in the same state as the Royals, maybe a year ahead of them in terms of the rebuild process. They're still a year or two away, probably 2, maybe 3. They didn't lose anybody that crazy, just mostly some very solid relievers, which obviously is important if you're looking to compete, but they're not quite at that level. Like I said, the biggest thing for me is, what do you guys remember being the big problem for the Tigers last year?
Offense is miserable.
Exactly. The offense was awful. It was abysmal. It was the worst offense in all of baseball. They didn't do anything. They added Cesar Hernandez on a minor league deal and then added a couple very young guys that have barely done anything in Philadelphia to supplement an offense that was so bad last year. I think I don't even know if they had anybody with an above average WRC plus that played the whole season. If you were going to do anything to this team, it was add to the lineup, and they did not do that. They added to the rotation mostly, which I thought was fine. Obviously, they're dealing with injuries to Skubal and Mize, but the fact that they did nothing to supplement the offense is just absolutely stupid. I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they think moving the fences in center field and right field and lowering the fence in right field is going to be the big catalyst to fix the offense. I don't see that happening, especially with the guys on your team right now. I have lots of hope for the young guys. I think Baez is going to take a step forward after struggling last year, and Austin Meadows will hopefully be a little healthier after just an insane year health-wise. But the fact that there was just one clear thing that needed to be fixed, and they just avoided doing that, I don't know what their plan is here. I also have to lean F. They lost a lot of guys. The fact that they lost a lot of offensive guys that they didn't have to lose, Victor Reyes, Willie Castro, Harold Castro, and Jeimer Candelario, were all still on contracts, and they were non-tendered. So they weren't given arbitration offers. So they just became free agents before they had to, which these guys could have definitely helped out the offense or possibly become trade chips at the deadline. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why they didn't do more or you supplement the team in different ways or improve that offense at all. But yeah, I also got to go F here.
Can you go lower than F? Because I'd give them F minus. They had the worst offseason, I think, of pretty much any team. They didn't do anything to actually make their team better. Their biggest ads on offense are Nick Maton and Matt Vierling. Both of those guys are bench players on every other MLB team outside of maybe 2 of them. I think me and Jake always kind of clown the Rockies for being inept. I think the Tigers are potentially the most inept franchise in all of baseball. They are this bad. Their offense is miserable. I think they're going to be the bottom feeder in AL Central. I don't think they're good. I don't think they're going to get much better either. They are terrible, and their farm system is the literal worst in baseball. They've been rebuilding for a decade. They've been rebuilding for a literal decade, and they have the worst farm system in baseball. They have wasted the back end of Miguel Cabrera's career. They're going to waste the back end of Javier Baez's career. They're an awful franchise. I think that they should be treated as such going forward and deserve all the slander in the world. They had the worst offseason by far. Tigers suck.
Oof, harsh words.
They suck. They suck positionally, and they suck as a baseball team. Like, their on the field is awful. Like, even their rotation, like, the guys they added are like Matt Boyd, who's like an upside play, and Lorenzen, who's very average. That's not enough. I mean, I don't know what it is at all. They traded away Greg, and they traded away lowest trade chip they had was Gregory Soto, who still has like three full years of control for Matt Veer and Nick Maton. Why? Those guys are garbage. Like compared to what you could have got for like from some team that's actually you something. Like the Phillies stole him. And we talked about it when they stole Greg Soto from the Tigers. Like I feel like they're run by a randomizer wheel. Should we do this? Yes. Yes. No. It's like, what's the? Oh my God! It's like Akinator. Like Akinator runs that team. Guess this guy. Is he a baseball player? Sure. Did he play for the Tigers? Might as well.
The Phillies come to them with a deal. They're just like, all right, flip a coin. Are we accepting? Oh, shoot. It's heads we have to accept.
Heads, yes. Tails is also yes because we have no clue what we're doing. That's what I would say. Yeah, Tigers are garbage. I would give them, if I could give them an F-, -F, whatever it needs to be, that's what I'd give them.
It all started with Jordan Zimmerman. Let's go back because
it really kind of did.
For my whole childhood, like the Tigers are always a good team. Like at least somewhere in the mix. But man, since Jordan Zimmerman,
never gonna be again. Apparently,
no.
Poor Miggy.
Yeah, poor Miggy.
Final year, and this is what he's got to go through.
Yeah,
he'll probably be their best hitter this year.
Come on, man! I thought you liked Javi Baez.
I mean, we saw.
I do like Javi Baez, but unless Javi Baez rebound, Javier Baez's lows are astronomically low. His highs astronomically high. It depends on what it is. And Javier Baez is a confidence player, and the problem is, how are you going to give a player like that confidence when your team is going to win 65 games at most? Yeah. Like. You're never going to get that out of him. And it's a real head scratcher as to why they signed him in the first place, because their team sucks. Like their team sucked then when he signed for him. It made no sense. I mean, it makes sense for him because they gave him a lot of money, but for the Tigers' point, like now you're committing a lot of money to a guy that's just going to be here while you guys suck. And you're going to not be playing someone that you could bring up at shortstop. I don't understand what they do. What they do over there, their run probably worse than the Rockies are run.
That's hard to do.
At least the Rockies have a good farm system. They're in like the top 13, 14. I think they're 12. Like according to Keith Law, I haven't seen Baseball Americas because I'm not going to buy a subscription. But like they're in like the top 15, and the Tigers are literally last. It sucks, man. It's honestly embarrassing. Go on to a real baseball. On to the Twins.
Yeah.
Twins. They added actually guys that play baseball professionally. The Minnesota Twins this offseason.
Yes. So the Twins, I mean, they actually made moves that make sense at least.
Yeah.
It hasn't been the most glamorous offseason. Of course, acquiring Pablo Lopez, I think, could be a big trade for them. I think. I know he's not going to necessarily be the ace of the rotation, but he is a nice piece to pick up. I think a guy like Joey Gallo is worth taking a risk on, especially with the shift going away. At least it could be moderately a decent, or not even decent, but a little bit less than decent baseball player. And then you got, of course, Carlos Correa, which we'll see how his knee is, but he played pretty good last year. So if you're the Twins, you may as well take that chance on Correa. And then, of course, Christian Vasquez. I mean, it's just a solid offseason. And then they lost some, I guess losing Gio Urshela and Luis Arias, of course, hurts a little bit. But I think the Twins are fine as a team, and I think they had a decent offseason. Not great, nothing crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a C.
Yeah, so really, really quick, the Twins additions from the offseason. They traded for Kyle Farmer. They Vasquez, Willie Castro, Joey Gallo, Carlos Correa, and Don Salud through free agency. And they also made trades for Pablo Lopez, Taylor, and then they added Dennis Santana from waivers. Their big losses all to free agency apart from one or two, which is Michael Fulmer, Eric Sanchez, and Aaron Sanchez, Dylan Bundy, Miguel Archer, and then they traded away, as Isaiah alluded to, Gio Urshela and Luis Arias. They did extend Chris Paddock as well, so they kind of keep him around in their rotation. Before I get to what I'm going to say, I'll let Jake say his thoughts because I think we're going to have a little bit different opinions.
Sure. I liked their offseason. I think the clearest, biggest storyline of their offseason was getting Correa. They sort of lucked into that one. We still don't know if it's luck or if they're sort of taking the bullet that the Mets and the Giants dodged with Correa's ankle, but the fact that they were able to win him sort of as a consolation at the end of the offseason, you know, they brought back their biggest star that they lost, and that's a pretty big deal. I think that sort of moves their offseason from a failure to a very good offseason, because then they supplemented after that, adding Pablo Lopez. I think they clearly won that trade, not only getting Pablo Lopez for Luis Arias, but also getting prospects with him as well. I don't know how they pulled that off, but then also supplementing the rest of the roster, the depth of the roster with guys like Solano and Michael A. Taylor, and Vasquez isn't really a supplemental guy, but Kyle Farmer as well. And then shoring up the catcher position and getting Gallo, who could have a big bounce back season with the shift ban. I really like all the additions they made. Some of the subtractions are not concerning, but sort of suck. Arias was a great player to have around last year, obviously won the American League batting title, but the rest of the guys that they lost are not guys I'm really concerned about. Obviously, Michael Fulmer, very solid reliever, and Gary Sanchez is a serviceable enough backstop. But then the rest of the guys are guys I don't even think they wanted on their team. Urshela's fine, but Chris Archer, not good last year. Sano hasn't been healthy for years. Dylan Bundy is nowhere to be found, and Aaron Sanchez didn't really do much. And keeping Chris Paddock around, he's returning from Tommy John. We're not really sure what to see from him, but it's cool to see that he's going to be around for an extra year. I think they did really well. I'm tempted to just go with an A for them. I don't think this is full on S tier because, you know, it's not quite that exciting, flashy off season where, you know, they did crazy stuff, but I think it was successful all around, all across the board. They did what they had to do. They filled the holes they needed to fill. They kept their big star. They made a trade for a starter that they clearly won, and they didn't lose anybody that's essential to the team. So I'm feeling really good about the offseason for the Twins.
Yeah, going back to our way too early predictions article on the Twins, I think they're going to be really good. Potentially going to be a playoff team. I really like this of their roster. Apart from Arias and Marcelo, they didn't really lose anyone of consequence. I think Fulmer is a pretty good reliever. You sort of live with losing him. That's not like the biggest deal in the world. Of course, they added Correa. He's the big story. And then they added Vasquez. So I think it's solid because their rotation on the back end is really young, and I think he's them out a lot. And Joey Gallo, I think, is one of the biggest collection projects, like bounce back guys in all of free agency. Maybe Bellinger. But Gallo is really solid. If you've actually been keeping up with the Twins in spring training, he is currently playing first base, and he is batting leadoff. Which is very funny. He is not. He also led off today and walked. Didn't strike out either. So there you go. Joey Gallo, contact. He's gonna walk all the time. Yeah, I like the Twins roster. I think their rotation is really underrated. I think their bullpen is sort of fine, and I think their offense has incredible potential to be one of the most dangerous in all the American. Buxton's obviously a star. Gallo on his day is amazing. And Correa is obviously Carlos Correa. I think that you have a really good, you know, I'm going to say 1-2 punch, but it's a 1-2-3 punch with the guys if they're all really hitting. I really like the Twins. I think I would probably give this one an S. They didn't lose anyone of consequence. I think their rotation really stacked. It depends on how much of a guy you are. I'm a Sonny Gray guy. I like Sonny. So I think I would hedge my bets for the Twins to be pretty good. I really like their offseason. So
Totally agree.
Yep.
Moving on, we can talk about the hat on Jake Crumpler's head, and that is the Chicago White Sox. Their additions in free agency, not as long as the Twins. Like the Twins were one of the teams that signed 1 million players as well. But the White Sox signed Mike Clevenger, Victor Reyes, Benintendi, Jake Marisnick, and Elvis Andrus. All of those through free agency. And then their subtractions are Vince Velasquez, Jose Abreu, Cueto, Josh Harrison, Danny Mendick, and Adam Engel. All those guys to free agency. No trades, no waiver, nothing fancy, just free agency transactions for the White Sox. So how are you feeling about him, Mr. Crumpler? You got the hat on.
This one's difficult. I listen to a podcast called Effectively Wild, and they talk to they do season previews every year of all 30 teams, and they talk to the White Sox beat writer, and I think he writes for The Athletic, and they graded the off seasons of every single team, the ones that they write for, obviously. He gave the White Sox an F. That is influencing my decision a little because he's the one who's tuned in to the team, and I might be agreeing with him. I don't like any of the moves that they made. They lost a big guy in Jose Abreu. They lost some depth pieces that really helped out the team last year. And this was a team that was really disappointing last year. Obviously, the big subtraction is Tony La Russa, which you can say is a positive. It could improve the team a lot from many different perspectives, but I don't think you can sort of consider that right now because that was just such a clear move that needed to be made. But I guess going one by one, I'm not going to go all the offseason moves, but Mike Clevinger was a mess signing in general before the controversy came out, which might keep him from pitching at all this year. So that's a terrible move. Andrew Benintendi, while fine in and of itself, especially in terms of like real life baseball player, they gave him so much money. They gave him the largest contract in franchise history and sort of made it seem like he's like a needle mover. I think he's an above average player, great defender, good contact skills. He's not a star. And this is a team that sort of needed an influx of talent at some level in the outfield, and I think Benintendi wasn't quite up to that snuff. And then the rest of the additions really don't move the needle at all. Elvis Andrus is fine, but he's the starting second baseman. He's going to be 35 years old. I'm not too excited about that. Losing Jose Abreu, pretty disappointing, especially from the aspect of like team leader type stuff. Jose Abreu is the veteran that's been around there for the last 7 years or however long he's been there, 6 years, and he's gone. And now there's nobody on the team. I mean, Yasmani Grandal is the only player over 30 on the offense, unless you consider Elvis Andrus and Leury Garcia as guys that are going to lead the team. So it's like you're losing your team leader, the guy that sort of keeps the clubhouse in check, especially now with a new manager in town as well. And the team is sort of lacking, not only from an offensive perspective, but from a vibe perspective. I feel like it's like the vibe of the team. They really struggled last year in a year where they had such high expectations, and this offseason sort of doesn't change those vibes. You get rid of Tony La Russa, the vibe changes a little, but you bring in a guy who brings controversy with him in Clevinger, and you don't really add too much elsewhere. It just feels like the vibe didn't change or got worse, and that sort of has me leaning F as well, because I still feel like this team is going to disappoint. You have lots of guys with potential, but you can't like put your playoff hopes on potential.
Yeah, I definitely think pretty much I could retweet everything you just said. I didn't think the Clevinger deal was that bad until the controversy, but I definitely never loved the deal. I mean, if you get a decent pitcher, it's worth it. But you're not, and you're getting a Clevinger. I'm not going to say much on the situation. And then Benintendi, the aspect of you paying him $75 million or whatever the amount was, and Jose Abreu went and got $53 million from the Astros. That tells me either he wanted to leave or they just made the wrong decision. But I guess it does kind of clear the way for Andrew Vaughn at first base. Is that like the silver lining here? Mm-hmm. And you get Andrew Benintendi, I guess, at the top of your lineup. But I mean, team wise, they're still probably. I got to really think about it, but they have a chance of winning the division. But for what they did in the offseason, they didn't help their chances. I'm definitely going to give them an F as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I'm standing as well in terms of the White Sox offseason. I mean, they didn't add enough. Indy also had sort of an outlier year that I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into him really continuing. Mike Clevenger, I mean, he posted like a mid fours FIP, like an exit and like a pretty bad ERA, and he had sort of bad numbers with StatCast last year. So the decline is there. He's been known for his career, and then you add on top of that the issues with the like violence thing, which I'm not going to talk about because else is going to talk about it enough. You don't need to hear it from us. So yeah, that sucks. They didn't really add much. Elvis Andrus, he's not much of a needle mover kind of move. We talked about last podcast as well. Jake Marisnik and Victor Ray, depth additions. So there's nothing really that you're going to get of that. They didn't really like lone bright spot is like lose anybody of consequence outside of Jose Abreu. But then you look at just how bad losing Jose Abreu kind of was. Because not only is he still productive, he was sort of the de facto leader of that team, like clubhouse-wise. Like he's the one that has been there the longest. He's the one that pretty much like he won the MVP for him in the COVID year. Like he was the guy for the White Sox. It felt like he was the beacon for them going forward and from the past, sort of the leader of that team. And then they lost him. Pretty much pennies on the dollar because their owner's cheap. Like I think that's kind of rough. They did that much, and then you also look at like the rest of their outlook for the team. I mean, their lineup is good, like it's pretty good. But Jake really like said it best. They needed star power. They needed a big bat to add, and Andrew Benintendi isn't that. They really needed a big bat because Eloy Jimenez is probably the biggest one in it. He's been struggling with health concerns, especially in like injury availability. The best ability is availability, as they say, and he hasn't really had that. The rotation is pretty good, top to bottom. So like you've got a strength there. You unfortunately lose Liam Hendriks this offseason, which they couldn't have foreseen. Like let's not hold that against them. They couldn't have foreseen Liam Hendriks having to go through what he's going through, but they didn't really hedge their bets in their bullpen. They didn't do anything else with it at all. They just sort of stood pat, and they're going to hope that they can kind of get bailed out by what they already had, which is sort of dwindling and hasn't gotten the job done previously. And then their one big addition to the lineup is going to be Oscar Colas, right? And he's a 24-year-old rookie that's, an if. And then outside of that, like going forward with their team, you got some big questions that you're going to have to answer because I think Tim Anderson's a free agent after this year. And then what do you do? Do you sign Tim Anderson to a really huge contract to keep him around, even though, he's not nearly in the same echelon in terms of the shortstops from this offseason? If anything, the only one you can really compare him to in terms of value is Dansby Swanson, but Dansby Swanson's a much better fielder. Tim Anderson probably projects as a second baseman going forward. So what's really the plan long-term? Their farm system's garbage. I think their farm system's bottom 5, according to Keith Law on the athletic rankings from a month ago. So the outlook in the future for the White Sox is kind of bleak, in my opinion. They have a lot of questions they're going to have to answer in the next coming seasons, and they just didn't help. If they're going to try to, the point of this offseason should have been trying to maximize what was left of their window, and they just kind of threw it away. They didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. Crazy how bad the off seasons have been in the AL Central. Just we've already given out 3 Fs across the board for 3 of the 4 teams.
Not good.
Making the Twins look really good.
That's why I picked them. And go read our way too early predictions article on theathletesub.org. You can see Jake talk about the White Sox and me talk about the Twins, and a host of other things. So go check that out, and come back later. Don't leave now. You open a split screen, do both at the same. We talked about some bad off seasons in the AL Central, though. Maybe we can get a little bit with the division leading Guardians from last season. They have probably the shortest laundry list of additions and subtractions, only adding names and only losing 4, but they lost. They added, let's do the additions first. They added Josh Bell, Mike Zunino, and Tuki Toussaint from free agency. And then they lost Austin Hedges in free agency. And then the other 3 they traded away, which are Nolan Jones, Owen Miller, and Will Benson. They have no extensions to really talk about. How are you guys feeling about the current state of the Cleveland Guardians?
Go ahead, Isaiah.
Yeah, I mean, not much has changed. I mean, I know Josh Bell's a pretty nice bat to pick up. Mike Zunino isn't terrible and neither is Tucson. None of these deals are bad. I don't honestly. I may be in the minority when I say I don't really trust Josh Bell long term in a lineup. But I do feel like if you're the Guardians, the best thing you could have done is to get J Ram more help. But I really feel like I want to believe that the Guardians would finish at the top of the division this year, but I really don't feel like they did much to add to their equation. I guess Josh Bell's fine. We'll see what they do in the pitching rotation. I'm gonna give them a D. I'm sorry, because I really think
no D's, C or F.
Oh, no D. Okay. C it is. They didn't do terrible. Josh Bell's not a bad pickup. He's a pretty good pickup, actually. I just don't really trust him long term. So.
It's definitely on the borderline there because this is the Guardians. They are not a team that make a lot of moves, but I don't think you can use that as an argument. I don't think they can have an excuse of we've never made moves in the past. We've never spent money in the past. So why would you expect us to do so now? I don't think that it keeps them exempt from being graded harshly because they never have done anything in the past. That's like being like, well, the Pirates are always penny pinching and the Rockies are always stupid. So like we have to grade them based on a curve. It's like, no, we don't. The Guardians have enough money. They're a team that won the division last year. They haven't won the World Series. They have the longest drought. It's like 70 years now. This is an F again. It's crazy. Josh Bell is a great addition. I think he fits well on this team. He fits the mold of like, they love switch hitters that don't strike out. Josh Bell fills that mold. He brings some power to the team that was severely needed. Mike Zunino is hopefully not going to block Bo Naylor from taking over. And then that's all they did. I mean, the rest of the team doesn't give me tons of confidence. They lost guys in the outfield that I think would have really helped. They've been struggling to find outfielders for the last few years, and they traded away a guy in Nolan Jones who seemed to have a lot of power potential, and a guy in Will Benson who I think is actually going to be really good for the Reds this year or in the subsequent years. And they've had some clear spots where they could improve. They're obviously great at creating solid major league pitchers, and that could make up for whatever they lack in the rotation. I think Shane Bieber is fine, but he's got the diminished velocity. Tristan McKenzie broke out last year. It's hard to tell if he's going to be able to recreate that, especially with his frame. And then Cal Quantrill, Aaron Savali, and Zach Plesac. I mean, we all know this, the Cal Quantrill quandary, as one of my pitcher list coworkers described it. Nobody knows how he's doing what he's doing, but I don't have any confidence in Savali and Plesac. And then you're just relying on minor leaguers, which, you know, like I said, it's up to the development staff of the Guardians, and their bullpen is really good because they're really great at pitching development. But the fact that they seem to be in a window of contention, which we haven't seen often for them in the past 50 years, this is the time for them to strike, and they really didn't. Seems like they lost more than they gained, and I think it's another F because they really could have secured this division like the White Sox have done in a couple years ago when they added to the team and made it look really strong and made them like clear front runners in a really weak division. And the Guardians decided not to do that. And now I think the Twins have leapfrogged them, and it's going to take some development from the offense and the rotation to, you know, offset whatever downsides that they acquired this offseason.
Yeah, it's obviously not a great one. From the Guardians, the only one that I'm really concerned about them losing was Nolan Jones. That's a little frustrating, but apparently they really do like the prospect that they got back, which is Juan Rigo. And he's played a little bit in spring training. I think he came into yesterday as a pinch hitter, and he got a walk. I think he's got a double and a couple other hits. He hasn't struck out yet in his like short time there, but he doesn't strike out like ever. I think he's like a 12% strikeout rate guy and like 15 guy. It projects like a second baseman. So he'll be up. I think the highest he's played is A. So they lost Nolan Jones, which kind of sucks. because this is a lineup that sorely lacked power. They put the ball in play. They're really good at that. Hit for a lot of contact, but they don't really hit for a lot of power. And Josh Bell is one that you're like hoping can really provide that power spark. But I mean, he's never really been like huge power guy. He's a good hitter. Don't get me wrong. But I think what's his career high in homers? Isn't it like 32 or something like that? Like
2019. It was the 2019 year
37.
where he had
37. That's like
that's juice ball.
That's juice ball like 22 in another year. His highest in a non-juiced ball year is 27. So like I think you can bank on him to maybe hit 22, 24-ish in this lineup. Other than that, really needed some help. Zunino's got some power, but he strikes out like 40% of the time. He's like not really going to move the needle for you. I do like their rotation a lot. I think Plesac is pretty solid. Savali is Savali. I don't think you can trust Aaron Savali. Shane Bieber, the decline in velocity for Shane Bieber is a bit of a concern, and Cal Quantrill is the greatest pitcher that's ever pitched. So like in their bullpen's obviously excellent. This one is another one like the White Sox that's very frustrating because it seems like this was the golden opportunity. Okay, our team, because they were supposed to be in a rebuilding year last year. They grabbed the bull by the horns. They won the Central. Wonderful. Build on that. Add to your team. It's not a small market excuse anymore. Paul Dolan owns that franchise. He's a garbage can. He won't spend any money on it. He's been talking about selling them for years. He just won't do it. He won't pull the trigger on it. And it's a little annoying because the Guardians literally could have seized this division, grabbed it by the throat, and ran away with it for the next few years because, like we said, are in flux. The Twins are sort of in a position where they're trying to get back to where they were a few years ago when they were the Bomba Squad. I'm going to plug the article that I've plugged like 58 times by now. Sort of talked about that too, is they're trying to get back to that form. Like the only teams that really it's going into the start of this season that are like that were really going to be on the same level was going to be the White Sox. And if the Guardians just added a few more pieces, they could have just completely ran off and left the White Sox in the dust because they had a terrible offseason as well. It's a missed opportunity. It's a huge, huge missed opportunity. And I hate it for Cleveland because it really might come back to bite them because the Twins look a lot better. The White Sox are good. They just it's hard to tell just how good they were like last year because Tony La Russa was so bad and made so many bad decisions. It was probably just a black cloud hanging over that locker room in general. So it's tough to see what you really have with the White Sox. Cleveland sort of blew it with this one. I'm really going to give them an F here.
Yeah, it's been a really positive episode.
Central blew it. They all blew it except the Twins. The Twins
trash division.
45 games.
It's like they work together. They're like, okay, so who's gonna make moves this because like it's
not
like,
me.
Like 1 year, 1 year Chicago makes moves, and then the Twins do nothing, and now the Twins are doing stuff, and nobody else is doing anything. So maybe the Central are more aligned than we think.
Maybe so. This was a really bleak episode if you like talking happy baseball because all this division did this offseason was suck it up.
Yeah, the rundown for this episode is 50th episode. All right, the pitch clock.
The Central's
I don't want to hear you talk about the pitch clock. All these guys are injured. Padres are great, and then everybody in the Central sucks. It was not quite how we usually talk about baseball, but it needed to be said. This is the reality of where the Central is. It's been like this for a few years.
It's the worst division in baseball, and it's been the worst division in baseball for like 5 or 6 years. Like top to bottom, the division sucks. Like it's just bad.
That's my boy Scopey. Yeah, that's my guy. Knows nothing about baseball.
That's right.
But he is in,
toxic baseball.
Hey man, Ohio, he knows Cleveland.
He is from Ohio.
He knows Cleveland is a city.
Yes, it is a city. And not much else at this moment. Well, no, the Cavaliers are pretty good. I can't say that. But yeah, other than that, that's all it is.
Well, maybe the one like upside is because Cleveland, like we all thought they'd suck last year. maybe they added the 3 guys and we'll get like 5 WAR from Zunino and we'll get like 7 WAR from Josh Bell. And J Ram will hit 60 home runs and win MVP running away like it looked like he was going to at the start of the year before he got hurt. Like,
they always outperform.
They always do. So like this is important to remember. This is an off-season grade. We gave some outlook on the teams in general, but just on what they added, like off-season wise, not good.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I'm rooting for the Guardians. I want them to be good. I want them to break that record. They were a really fun team last year. I love their theory of offensive. The way that they go about getting players that don't strike out. Davis and I love guys that walk more than they strike out, and that's a big Guardians thing to do. And I love how they're able to create a bunch of starting pitchers out of nothing, create relievers out of nothing. But yeah, it is disappointing to see that. Davis, you said it perfectly. Like they had the opportunity to be like, nah, this is our division, and then they were just like, you know what? It's the SpongeBob meme.
Yeah, be assertive. Let him have it. That's okay. You can have it.
Exactly. Yeah, that was them to the Twins. Yeah, that was them to the Twins.
Oh yeah. On the least positive note that we can possibly have, I think it's time that we close out our wonderfully morose episode number 50 of Free Baseball. We've been here for a literal like two weeks over a year now. 50 episodes. We're halfway to 100. Like now we have a consistent schedule. We'll actually probably get to 100 at a reasonable time frame from now. But as always, we end every single podcast for just like we did 49 episodes now ago by bringing in the closer, talking about a closer from baseball's illustrious past. And Jake is going to give us a wonderful history lesson on today's closer.
Yes, today's closer is the great Bobby Thigpen. He had a 9-year career from 1986 to 1994 with the White Sox, the Phillies, and the Mariners. He was drafted by the Brewers in the 7th round of the 1983 draft and did not sign, and then was drafted again in the 1985 draft by the White Sox in the 4th round. He was commonsensically named nicknamed Thiggy, because his last name is Thigpen, so that makes complete sense. He debuted in August of 1986 against the Red Sox, tossing 3 innings, allowing 5 hits, 2 earned, and 2 walks while striking out 2. He came out of the gates hot that year and took over the closer role immediately, tossing 35 2/3 innings that year with a 1.77 ERA, which would be his career best for the rest of his career. He saved 7 ball games as well in his debut season. He kept the success rolling into 97 into 87 before becoming one of the game's best closers. In 1987, he tossed 89 innings with a 2.73 ERA and 16 saves. Across the next 2 seasons in 1988 and 89, he had back-to-back seasons of identically 34 saves. In 88, he tossed 90 innings with a 3.30 ERA, and he led the American League with 59 games finished. And in 89, he tossed 79 innings with a 3.76 ERA. Once again, 34 saves in each of those seasons. And then in 1990, the best season of his career, he made history. That season, he tossed 88 2/3 innings pitched with a 1.83 ERA, which is a career best for him with a minimum of 40 innings pitched. He also set a career best with a 1.04 whip. And surprisingly, he had 57 saves, which led all of baseball and was a career best. At the time, it also set the major league record for saves in a single season. He also struck out a career best 70 batters, led the entire baseball with 73 games finished, and led the American League with 77 games. This season, he made his first and only All-Star team of his career. He won the AL Raleigh's Relief Man of the Year award as well. He finished 4th in Cy Young voting in the American League and 5th in MVP voting. So just an incredible season, setting the Major League saves record and just absolutely shutting down offenses at the end of games. But that season took a lot out of him. He began to deal with back problems subsequently, and things started to go downhill after he had one more good season in 1991, where he had a 3.49 ERA and saved 30 more ball games. the effects of that back injury started to appear in 1992 as it affected his abilities on the field. He tossed 55 innings of a 4.75 ERA, but he still saved 22 ball games. And then it was even worse the following year in 1993. He pitched to a 5.71 ERA in the first half before he was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies, where he pitched to an even worse 6.05 ERA. And somehow he just kept going downhill. It was like he was skiing. He posted a horrible 9.39 ERA in 7 games with the Mariners in 1994 before going overseas to Japan to pitch for 2 more years. His MLB career, though, ended at the age of 30, which is wild. After he set the single season saves record, his career came to a halt very quickly. And that career featured 7.8 baseball reference WAR across 568 and 2/3 innings pitched with 376 strikeouts, a 3.43 ERA, a 1.36 whip, and 201 saves, which is good for 53rd on the all-time career saves leaderboard.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
I mean, if you look at where he ended his career, if he would have had a couple more good, if he didn't run into that downhill spiral, he could have potentially been, I mean, I don't know if I would go Hall of Famer, but he would have had a really nice career, even better than what he had. And by the way, Scopey, there are 2 socks in baseball, okay? he's learning the show. So,
Just the 2.
how many socks? Just 2. I mean, 4 if you count, because they're wearing 2 at once.
Mm-hmm.
Or even 60, because everybody wears socks. Anyway. So.
Yeah. So
Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks legend, Bobby Dickman.
more like Fukuoka SoftBank Sox.
I'm trying to think of a guy to compare Dickman to, because I feel like he's one of those guys when you're like, and maybe when you're growing up, that was like really good, but just not a Hall of Famer. That's what he strikes me as. I don't know. What's another that comes to mind? Like I was gonna go with Joe Nathan, but Joe Nathan was pretty good.
No, Joe Nathan's actually a Hall of Famer.
Joe Nathan should have been a Hall of Famer. We did that on one of the old ones where I made the argument for Joe Nathan to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I still would.
Like
He's like Carlos Marmol, Brian Wilson.
There you go.
Yeah.
Brian Wilson's a good one.
Yeah.
Flash in the pan.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it sucks that injuries ended his career so early because he really had a great peak. 57 saves, I think, was the American League record until K-Rod broke it, and I think was the second highest. I think it's still the second highest. What did Edwin Diaz have that one year? 56?
That sounds right. Let me look it up. They added an O to his name on
I just Edwin O. Diaz because we didn't know who Edwin Diaz
he had 57. He tied it.
Okay, yeah. So it's still up there as one of the biggest save seasons of all time, and it probably influenced how closers are used to this day. But yeah, I guess we'll close it out with Scopey's who's the team of the year of 2022? Who was the team of the year last year?
Yankees. Every time. Every year.
The worst team of the year. We're talking about best team.
Ooh.
The Guardians?
I think in terms of like obviously the Astros won, but in terms of like who captured everyone's hearts was the Phillies and the Guardians.
Yeah, I don't even know. The A's.
Aaron
Is the A's.
Rockies. The Rockies are always mine and Jake's favorite team. We're Colorado Rockies fans, and whatever other team that we say we support is wrong because we actually support the Colorado Rockies.
Isn't it? Was it? I remember last year you guys were really dogging on the Rockies for some reason.
we always dog on the Rockies.
Year.
You listen to this podcast.
Really dogging on. What was it? I think they Trevor Story, they contaminated the Red Sox with Trevor Story and something else. I forget. But yeah, it was the Rockies are a great team.
Yeah, the Rockies are everyone's favorite baseball team. Everyone wants to see the Rockies do good. They're like the Browns when they were losing every single game. Just making the literal worst decisions they possibly could.
I heard somebody say that they were surprised at the Rocky's mascot is a dinosaur because they thought that Dick Monfort probably doesn't even believe dinosaurs are real. I was just like, yes, that is true. He doesn't know anything.
Cole Hamels is trying to come back, so
he already
He
did.
signed with the team.
He
Who was
did.
it?
They said he probably didn't expect nothing.
Yeah.
He's a dinosaur.
They got Daniel Bard. Daniel Bard's good. He's only like 52, I think. Chris Bryant's not going to get hurt every single on the third game this year and never play again.
I mean, Johnny Damon's on the bananas.
I did see that.
They got Nolan Jones. They had Josh Reddick too. The bananas.
Yeah,
they had Josh Reddick for a minute.
Not a fan of Johnny Damon anymore.
Yeah, Johnny. I used to like Johnny Damon. Johnny Damon's kind of
you used to like Johnny Damon until you learned about him as a person.
Johnny Damon's kind of an idiot.
He told me, man, on Cameo. I think I asked him a question once. I was like, it was between it was New York versus LA, and he was neither of them. It's Florida. He said because Florida.
He's a Florida guy. That tells you everything.
Johnny Damon, one of the all-time leaders in baseball in the X handsome stat. Like that's all it's got going for him anymore, man.
And I quote, he said because of Florida, with the mask laws and everything, that they were more lenient with that. So that was his reason about Florida. But he was really cool to me overall, even if it was a little
crazy.
I think he ended up actually making it because it was like $4 to message him, and then he made it free for me for a period of time. So pretty cool guy. I mean, shoot.
Shout out to Johnny Damon on Cameo.
Yeah, I have a feeling he'd be if he was on Twitter, he'd be agreeing with Aubrey Huff a little bit too much.
Oh, don't say
that. He's a drunk driver. That's all I'll say.
Well, yeah, he's kind of an idiot.
He said, "You're not distant parents who are still supportive of the middle child." I'm not sure. So,
yeah. Well, should we close it out?
I'm reading the Rockies prospect rankings, and all of these names sound made up.
He's already preparing for next week.
Oh no! Well, no, we're doing the NL Central next week. If you want to talk NL Central, come back next week. Yeah. So. Isaiah, you are a wonderful, lovely guest. Go ahead and plug all your stuff.
Man, my Twitter, Isaiah2896, but it's all at the Athletes Hub, and of course, Scopey. Me and him are working on something called the Book of KQ. It's a series coming up, but that's neither here nor there. By the way, I got the name. I was trying to think of a name that for Thiggy. What's his name?
He is the nickname.
Rafael Soriano. That's who I want to somebody else really good in our time, but probably not enough. Anyway. I wanted to come with one before we went.
Good call.
So, yeah, that's all I
got. Davis, was the name you were looking at Warming Bernabel?
You had to look at it once I said it.
Does sound like a fake name.
I want you to scroll down a little bit and look at Joe Rock.
Joe Rock.
And Carson Palmquist and Aaron Shunk and McCade Brown. Those are not real names.
Easy question, Rockies.
Yeah. I need Michael Toglia to do something big because he's like my only first baseman in every league that I'm in. So
they will not play him until
they're never gonna until he's 27 probably.
Yeah. Well, Isaiah plugged his stuff, so I'll plug mine. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake Crumpler. My name just combined into one word. You can read me on theathleteshub.org. You can find me on pitcherlist.com. I also do a podcast there called In the Pen where we talk about relievers every single week. So tune into that. It comes out on Fridays. You can find it on the podcast apps all over the place. I also write for Baseball HQ as a playing time analyst. And if you want to just see all of my work and nobody else's, go to crumplerbaseball.com and you'll see all of our podcasts and all of my, yes, they do, and all of my articles as well.
Yep. It's the same thing for me, except without all the picture list and other stuff. You can find me on theathleteshub.org and you can follow me on Twitter. It's on the screen at DVSBird. So you can just hang out with me on my Twitter and watch me.
Or at your house.
At my house. It does look pretty cool. It's a pretty cool house. It's got some plants. I don't really have anything else going on. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I should post and retweet and complain. That's usually what I do on Twitter. And you can
what does that say? Craig Jumpler? Come on, man.
Craig Jumpler is what it says. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm usually on there complaining and retweeting a bunch of garbage. And every now and then I write stuff and post things, usually with Jake and other guys on the Athletes Hub. So follow us there. Make sure you come back next week. We do this every single Wednesday at 9-ish. We don't really have a specific time. Sometimes it's 9 o'clock. Sometimes it's like 9:15. Usually it's 9-ish. And follow the Athletes Hub on Twitter at Athletes Hub, so you can check out whenever we're posting cool new stuff and whenever we're going to go live with this podcast and Isaiah's podcast for one, the Cap Space Jam league that they've been running, and two, for Deep Takes from Three. If you like basketball, check that one out too. And the biggest thing about us is we're fans first. So we try to approach things from a fan perspective. Of course, we're going to hyper-analyze things because me and Jake are big, dumb nerds. And we like baseball, talking about
baseball. Anymore.
I have my contacts in, so I'm from a nerd. We're trying to approach things from a fan perspective first. So if you want to get real opinions from real people and not from a mass media outlet, read our stuff. Yeah. Follow or else you won't sleep at night. Simple. Follow or else you're going to let all your houseplants die. So follow us on all of our social medias and read everything on the Athletes Hub. I've said it a million times now, but that's all I've got.
I want to say something first before you guys go anywhere, because I was talking with because I always talk about the shows I do and the articles I do, everything. That's all I talk about. And I'm like, man, these two are just the most consistent. So that's why, yes, shout out to Jake and Davis for making it to 50 episodes. I had 5 pages of a rundown to look forward, to look through. And Jake every week without fail, just so consistent. And of course, Davis just being there every week without fail. You guys deserve major props for making it to 50 episodes.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be a part of like 5 of them, but you guys are great, man. I really enjoy the show that you guys do every week. And
we're gonna keep a running tally, however many times you come on.
Yeah. I think
cheers to 50 more.
Exactly. We're gonna have a party for 100.
Yes, big party. All right.
Take care.
Peace.